November 12, 1943. The atmosphere was dense and cold inside a small, unassuming office at the Bendler Block, the imposing nerve center of German army intelligence operations in Berlin. Here, where the fate of entire fronts was debated, a truth more devastating than any physical defeat was about to be acknowledged. Facing this stark reality were two of the Wehrmacht's most accomplished and respected analysts, Colonel Reinhard Galen, a sharp, unyielding mind who oversaw intelligence concerning the sprawling Eastern Front, and his meticulous counterpart, Colonel Alexis von Rouroena, responsible for tracking the capabilities of the Western Allies. Both men had earned their high positions through a rare combination of demonstrated analytical brilliance and almost clinical attention to detail, and a professional detachment that usually shielded them from ideological blindness. Before them lay a collection of seemingly mundane papers, documents utterly devoid of tactical maps or strategic troop movements. They were standard American military logistics reports, purely administrative forms captured during recent intense fighting in Italy. The papers were filled with columns of black and white figures, numbers detailing supplies shipped, supplies used, and the staggering volumes of new material requested by United States forces. On the surface, they were unexciting bureaucratic forms, yet the raw arithmetic embedded within these charts held a silent, undeniable secret, a truth that spelled the mathematical impossibility of a German victory. Both officers had spent the entirety of the preceding week consumed by this data, obsessively cross-referencing every figure, rerunning complex calculations, and desperately searching for any error, any plausible mistake that might diminish the apocalyptic implications of the figures they had ultimately confirmed. Von Rouroena's hands, renowned for their steady precision when handling classified reports, were visibly trembling as he turned one of the sheets. The sheer, overwhelming scale of American abundance documented in those charts defied everything the Germans knew about wartime resource management and industrial limitations. The figures represented a material reality so colossal, so readily verified through multiple independent sources, that it revealed an enemy with an industrial capacity entirely beyond anything the German war machine could even conceive of, let alone hope to match. This realization solidified into a terrifying certainty. All German aspirations for military victory were no more than fantasies, disconnected entirely from the material reality of industrial warfare. The numbers did not lie. They were an irrefutable, objective truth that could not be argued with or dismissed except through the most determined, willful blindness. For years, the German military doctrine had hinged on the principle of superior tactics, speed, and doctrine. The concept of blitzkrieg, the foundational belief, was that innate organizational superiority and military genius could defeat enemies sequentially before their overwhelming material advantage could be mobilized and brought to bear. But by late 1943, that window of opportunity was not just closing, it was permanently sealed shut. The captured supply charts documented an industrial output that rendered tactical genius secondary and strategic planning almost futile. No amount of heroism, no depth of personal courage, and no brilliance of generalship could possibly defeat the cold arithmetic of material power, the simple, brutal math of tonnage, fuel, and raw steel. The logistics forms were silent, undeniable witnesses to a victory already achieved on the assembly lines of Detroit, the oil fields of Texas, and the foundries of Pittsburgh. The specific details contained within the captured American documents were especially chilling to the German analysts. They showed more than just the volume of standard ammunition or basic food rations. They illustrated the unprecedented, almost wasteful rate of delivery for highly specialized equipment, the astonishing speed of replacement for damaged vehicles and heavy weapons, and the deep, seemingly unceasing reserve pools of strategic resources like high-octane aviation fuel, rubber, and precision spare parts. The American supply system demonstrated a level of redundancy that bordered on the careless, a degree of oversupply and massive resource staging that Germany, running on increasingly strained reserves and ersatz materials, could only dream of achieving. This comparison was stark and unforgiving. The German war machine planned rigidly on what it absolutely had to have. The American war machine planned expansively on what it might possibly need. This fundamental, deeply embedded difference in production and logistical capacity translated directly into an insurmountable battlefield dominance.
Galen and von Rouroena were forced to confront the harsh and objective comparison between German and American war production. Despite Nazi Germany's total commitment to war from 1939 onward, its command economy was perpetually riddled with structural inefficiencies, debilitating inter-service rivalries over resource allocation, and the rapidly crippling effects of Allied strategic bombing, which, though not yet fully realized, were already beginning to metastasize through the supply chains. The United States, by sharp contrast, had successfully converted its colossal civilian economy into an unstoppable engine of war with a speed and overwhelming scale that continuously astonished and terrified the German experts. The American industry was producing 4 times the amount of aircraft, 5 times the number of trucks, and a demonstrably superior quality and volume of heavy ordnance. The figures detailed in the logistics reports were merely the outflow. The charts proved conclusively that the industrial well supplying this massive outflow was, for all practical purposes, inexhaustible. As military professionals, trained to deal only with verifiable facts no matter how unpleasant, Galen and von Rouroena meticulously compiled their findings into a concise, brutal, and fact-based assessment. The conclusion of their analytical exercise was unavoidable, and it was horrifying. Germany was irreversibly engaged in a war of attrition that it could not possibly win, because the industrial base of its primary enemy could absorb virtually any German operational success and instantly replace the lost resources, while the German industrial base could not. They had seen the truth laid bare, revealed not by spies or broken codes, but by the dry, objective print of the American forms. They realized the war was no longer about daring maneuvers or fortified defensive lines. It was a straightforward matter of who could build more tanks, more aircraft, and more ships, and who possessed the logistical mastery to deliver them to the front faster than they could be destroyed. They prepared their report, a document of utmost secrecy and profound consequence, intended for the highest echelons of the High Command. Both analysts clearly understood the professional and personal risks involved in presenting such a damning, uncompromising indictment of the Führer's cherished strategic vision. Yet their professional integrity, their deep-seated training, and a sense of profound, duty-bound obligation to the German soldier compelled them forward. They sought to communicate one simple, vital truth. Every single month the war continued, the material disparity widened exponentially. The time for a strategic, negotiated settlement based on these brutal military realities was now, before the full industrial avalanche crushed them completely. The report, an appeal to reason and arithmetic, was passed up the chain of command, where it was immediately met with a wall of denial, aggressive disbelief, and ultimately outright hostility. The information was repeatedly filtered, dismissed, or actively suppressed by senior officers whose deeply entrenched ideology had completely replaced their ability to reason objectively. They simply refused to accept the evidence. In their minds, how could mere numbers negate the vaunted valor of the German soldier, the historical brilliance of the general staff, and the strategic genius of the Reich? The idea of losing the war to logistics, to a spreadsheet, to a cold calculation of industrial output was an intolerable existential insult to their entire belief system. They willfully preferred the comforting delusion of military miracle cures, superweapons, unexpected tactical breakthroughs, or a political rupture in the enemy alliance, to the cold, hard, and undeniable reality of the industrial calculus. The intelligence officers, watching from the dark sidelines of the Bendler Block, were forced to witness their careful, professional warning slowly turn into a devastating prophecy. They observed the increasing desperation of the military campaigns, the rapid, visible dwindling of strategic reserves, and the relentless, crushing pressure exerted from both the eastern and western fronts. They knew, long before the ultimate bloody collapse, that the final outcome was already settled and recorded. The only terrible question remaining by late 1943 was simply how much longer the German leadership would willfully deny the inescapable truth revealed by those captured numbers. How many more men would have to be needlessly sacrificed before political ideology and dogma finally yielded, allowing arithmetic to replace wishful thinking as the sole foundation for strategic decisions? The answer came violently on May 7, 1945, with Germany's unconditional total surrender. The catastrophic defeat was not primarily the result of one single decisive military force or battle. It was the inevitable, mathematical consequence of industrial capacity determining victory in modern mechanized conflict. The intelligence officers who first studied those captured American supply documents in late 1943 understood this fundamental principle 18 long and wasted months earlier. They had pleaded with their superiors for sanity and reason. They had meticulously presented the detailed, verifiable evidence. They had laid out the unassailable mathematics of their demise. Their warnings were deliberately and tragically ignored, and the ultimate cost of that willful, ideologically driven blindness was paid in the lives of millions. The captured American supply charts documented not just the complex minutiae of military logistics, but the absolute, profound futility of engaging in protracted combat against a vastly superior industrial machine. The numbers spoke a devastating truth that the German leadership found completely impossible to accept. In the ruthless theater of modern industrial warfare, the productive capacity of factories fundamentally outweighs battlefield courage. The speed and efficiency of production lines dictate ultimate outcomes far more than any tactical maneuver, and in the end, the simple, devastating arithmetic of material power always and absolutely prevails.